Welcome back to the second episode of the Small Business Pulse 302. We have Carlos Casas with us today. Hello, Carlos.
Hello, Brian.
How are you?
I'm well, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming on.
You look like you even have some studio lights or something on you, shining on you.
Yeah, I've got three different
Nice.
lights going on right here.
Wow.
It's all, I can't show you the studio. This is as good as it gets right here.
That's cool, man. That's really neat.
Yeah. Again, thanks for coming on.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I had the pleasure of meeting you when you were helping out with Factory Sports. Pat, who I just interviewed and put up that video recently. And we've stayed in touch since then over the past 3 or 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, you've opened up Urban Float in Rehoboth.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me and the viewers a little bit of background on yourself and Urban Float?
Sure. So professionally, my background primarily is in business development and sales. So prior to Urban Float, I worked for GoPro, the camera company. People know what that is, I'm sure by now.
Yeah.
I was their business development. I was one of their business development managers there for about a couple of years. Prior to GoPro, I worked for IBM, and I was part of the Mid-Atlantic sales team for social software based out of the Carolinas, but my territory was DC. So, and then prior to that, I was an entrepreneur. I had a software company prior to all of that. So after my stint with GoPro was done, talking with my wife, we instead of jumping right back into the corporate world, and there were some opportunities for me to jump back in. We did a long, hard look at everything and wanted to jump back into business development from an entrepreneurial side. So after about a 6 or 7 months of evaluating different businesses, my wife and I concluded that we wanted to get into something that was a bit more unique, that wasn't already in our area, and something that spoke to health and wellness, similar to what you do for a living. So one of the business consultants, partners of mine or friends of mine out of Florida, turned me on and said, "Hey, you need to take a look at this concept. I want to shoot you a video. We're going to talk about it tomorrow, but don't have any judgment until you see the video." So I watched the video from home. I was like, "Whoa, what the heck is this?" And I showed my wife, Amy Casas, and she just like threw her hands up and she's like, "I'm in. Let's do it."
And that's the sensory deprivation flotation
Correct.
Tanks.
Yep. So Urban Float's a franchise based out of Seattle, Washington. They're one of two only franchise systems in the country. And my wife is really the brainchild behind all this. She's a mindfulness teacher in the school, not in the school districts, but for schools. She's traveled or worked locally for the Minds Over Matter initiative, headed by Lisa Rector, and she's an adjunct teacher with them. And Amy's super into yoga and mindfulness, meditation, holistic healing, things like that, and natural ways of healing and
Self-treatment.
recovery.
Yeah.
Self-care, right?
I actually heard her talk on the Rehoboth Social podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
So, part of this, a lot of this business was for her. It's just one of her passions, and I'm the business developer. So we decided to move into Urban Float, and we went out to Seattle and we floated out there for the second time. I actually tried it out at a float spa down in Berlin, West Ocean City, called Ocean Elements. Nice family-run business as well down there. We were really drawn to the business concept. It was unique, super healthy, 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt and 10 inches of water in a private sensory managed room, a private shower. There's a lot of medicinal benefits, as you know, Brian, to magnesium sulfate.
Yep.
Made famous, floating is pretty big out on the West Coast. Alternative lifestyles and just really, really, it's gained a lot of traction out west, and it's starting to move its way east now. And I think when Urban Float started franchising 5-6 years ago, there was probably less than 100 float centers around the country. Now there's probably more than 300-400 in the country. So still a relatively small industry. We are the only urban float in Delaware and in the Mid Atlantic, actually, we're the first on the East Coast. I am the franchise developer for the corporate location. So my job is to build them up and open up others around the area. But anyway, fast forward, we've been open for about a year now. It's been a blessing. The community has really embraced us. We have over 250 members in just about a year of business. We've floated 15,000 sessions last year. Yeah, it's been really neat. And people who are coming in for all sorts of reasons, pain, mental health, athletic recovery, surgeries, you name it, coming into an anti-gravity environment, taking all that stress and pressure off your back.
And not only physically, but really mentally as well. It takes a lot of stress off your mind, kind of like you were saying your wife is very into the mindfulness. So there's a physical and psychological component to it.
100%. And I would actually say the physical benefits are profound, but the difficulty of floating is actually trying to wrap your head and being by yourself for an hour and letting go of time and letting go of judgment and being more mindful, being more present. It's definitely a skill, and I myself had to learn. I'm learning how to do it still, and it was pretty fascinating. Actually, it's been fascinating still.
And that's a great segue into the next section of this conversation, which is how the coronavirus has affected your business, because a lot of people are having to just be by themselves. You're not going out as much, so they're kind of getting their own taste of sensory deprivation in a sense,
right.
During the self-isolation,
They're being deprived, aren't they?
A little bit. I don't think it's as fun as what you offer, but
right.
Maybe they'll appreciate it a bit more after all this. So how has COVID-19 coronavirus affected Urban Float?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. We're definitely at the beginning of our second year of business and really had an upward trajectory. And I had we've really started to gain momentum through the beginning of the winter and the end of fall into January, February. It was just weird. Within couple of weeks, when we just started hearing about New York, we were closed. Now, we were actually categorized based on our NIAC number and as personal health and personal care. And I confirmed with the governor's office, we actually met all the requirements to actually stay open because we were less than 10 people. You're in a private room. You can be 6 feet away in our spotters, and really no more than 6 to 7 people in the float center at one time. So we were actually technically legally allowed to be open, and we're considered a health wellness center. So calling it essential or not, I don't know, but we actually were given the blessing from the governor's office to stay open. However, we wanted to be supportive in the community, and we wanted to just flatten the curve. And so we decided to close like 3 weeks ago. Definitely has been a hit on the business, only being open for 14 months. But our member community is very supportive. We haven't had many drop off in memberships. A lot of frozen memberships, which is understandable. People aren't using the services, so therefore we were happy to accommodate them because a lot of people are hurting right now without jobs, and what was it, something like 600,000 or something like that, 6 million unemployment applications. Yeah. So we're trying to be empathetic to everybody's situation. And we're just thankful that we had a really good year, and to your next point, we're probably going to come out stronger, I hope. We were very, when people come in and you're naked in our float center, if they don't know us from Adam, You're in a private room taking showers. So sanitation and sterilization has always been number one to us, even from the very beginning.
Definitely.
So our water, our float solution is heavily maintained and heavily, we take it to a fine tooth comb in terms of the science and the chemistry of the water. Our rooms are sanitized. So the cleanliness part, there's nothing that we really needed to change because we were already very sanitized. And obviously we felt, we can probably have gotten away with being open. The traffic, the foot traffic, definitely, we started to see the slowdown in that week, that third week of March. We were literally floating 27 to 45 people a day, which is just about 50%. Our capacity is around 60 float sessions a day. We're roughly 50 to 60% capacity, which is around the industry standard for any health spa. So we were really excited about it, and we were able to, we saw it wasn't so much about our float center, but people just being afraid to get out. And, the decline in business was definitely apparent in the third week.
Being in your office, I know I used to see jars sitting out of each room just testing jars. So I know you were constantly testing the waters. I read on your website that I think every tank is filtered 3 times between each float.
Or more, yeah.
And I don't think cleanliness was an issue. I do think that people are just afraid to get out, and reasonably so right now. But also thank you for allowing the country to flatten the curve a bit more. I know Urban Float being based out of Washington, they're kind of, it's a little bit more sensitive out there. They're kind of the first state zero, if you would, to really be affected in the US. So can imagine that it was strongly encouraged to kind of close down from the higher ups potentially. Being a franchise, do you feel like you're better supported being a part of a franchise than you are if you're solo ownership of this single float tank service?
I'm a big franchise. I'm a fan of franchising. Only I think I would say it's more expensive, generally speaking, but I think, especially in this line of work with flotation therapy and being in the float center, Amy and I didn't know anything about running a float spa, a float center. So going into an established, somewhat of a name brand in the industry that had the specifications for the float center, the pods, the engines, the colors, the branding, the marketing, it really made it very close to turnkey.
Yeah.
I think it shortens the runway for a lot of people. I'm not one to reinvent the wheel personally. And I think there's a value to that. Some people like to figure it out on their own, and I think there's no wrong answer. I felt that there was a immediate value to Amy and I to jump right into a successful business model, execute it to their strategy and specifications, and it's worked out so far.
Absolutely.
Could we have done it ourselves? We probably could have. I think we would have definitely not have been as far as we are now, quite honestly. So hope that answers your question.
Yes. Is the summer usually a busier time? We're in Rehoboth, Lewis, Southern Delaware. We are more of a seasonal community in terms of the economics. So in being open last summer, do you see that the summer is much more higher revenue for you?
Interesting. So April would have been our 14th month in business. So it'll be a year and 2 months. And we found so far in just our 14 months that our winter months have been our strongest, only because the locals, it's a membership based business model. So that lends itself to more of the local community. Last summer, we definitely had a bit more tourists. We had more people coming in for the weekend, more of the one-time experience. Ooh, what's flotation? What's the sensory deprivation? So we had, I would say it's a different clientele, like to your point. Traffic-wise, it was relatively the same. We were still hovering around 32, 35 floats a day, which was, quite frankly, really busy for us. It's a lot of floats to handle, and a lot of salt and stuff. But the winter time, the end of fall into the Christmas time, and this is where COVID has really impacted us. The spring is historically our best season, and we're
Okay.
shut down. That was rough.
So is there
That is
any,
rough.
I, it's hard to imagine. I mean, a lot of people are going through different things, but being a
Right.
business owner and having to shut down completely is kind of, it's very difficult.
Right.
Is there any type of pivots or changes you've made in the company to try and develop some type of revenue during this shutdown time?
So um, we have a fairly decent online presence that's managed by the corporate office in Seattle, urbanfloat.com. Our location is /Rehoboth, so it's urbanfloat.com/Rehoboth, and there's a whole online offerings there, and we have generally done okay with that. Definitely, there's more of a person-to-person, one-to-one effect that's a bit stronger, but interesting this past few weeks, and nothing as of an action of ours, but people have reached out to us to buy our salt
Oh,
because we have it in bulk. So when you go to Walmart or CVS or Walgreens, you can buy a pound of Epsom salts for like 6, 7, 9, $10. Well, because of our float tanks, and each tank has 1,200 pounds, we actually have 50-pound bags of Epsom salt that we purchased from a farm in Virginia,
okay.
and it's USP grade, super, very high end, and we're selling them for $40 a bag, which is less than $1 per pound. So we've been loading people's trunks up without even, they just pull up to the car and we're just loading bags of salt so they can use it at home. So take
Yeah.
Urban Float at home, right? Take Epsom salt baths at home, and they get a great deal on bulk Epsom salt. So I wouldn't say it's a lot of revenue. It's just something that we're able to offer. I got to be a little careful because that salt's for our pods.
Yeah.
So
Can't give away too much of it.
yeah, and I appreciate the question. We actually also started a healthcare float relief program when this started in early March, and what we're doing in partnership with BB, in agreement with BB, is to help healthcare providers, not necessarily in BB, but any healthcare worker or provider, whether they're on the front lines or they're just like you, Brian, in healthcare. We actually are asking our members to donate floats to their float credits that they have in the bank to the program. So when we do reopen, if you're a healthcare provider that can show proper ID, whatever floats are in the program, you can use them to redeem and float at no cost.
And I'll
And
have all the links to what we talk about right now in the description below. So if you want to
yeah, it's
donate
great.
to a healthcare provider, please look in the links down below.
Yeah, and our SRP, or our retail price for a float's $90 per session. We've reduced it for the program for $39 while we're closed. Again, all those floats go right to the program. And if you're a healthcare provider, a worker, frontlines, whether you're picking up people from their homes and taking them into physical therapy, or whether you're at the front lines in the ER, when we reopen, you just got to show some ID, and we'll have a bucket full of floats for you to use to de-stress. I think that's pretty cool. Again, it's not a huge revenue thing for us. It's more of a community thing, because
Absolutely.
$39 a float is not necessarily a price point for us, but it's something that we want to kind of give back a little bit.
I think that's amazing that you're doing that.
Yeah. We think we're seeing people on TV, and there are people working around the clock with masks and gloves, and I have an idea of what's going on at BB. I really don't know what's happening there. I would imagine they're fairly busy there, and also in Milton and Dover and Milford, and but flotation therapy is a great modality to relax and just, and I think when we do reopen, I hope all you healthcare providers, you too, Brian, will take advantage of the program and come and detach and relax.
I can say that I really appreciate that, what you're doing there, and I think everybody else will as well.
Hope so.
So there's a lot of talk of COVID-19, the coronavirus, potentially coming back in the fall of 2020.
Right.
And that's with the mindset of hopefully we get a solid few months of getting back to a normal life during the summertime. Do you and Urban Float in entirety have any plans or any type of thought process in the work of changes to make if this does happen again, so that you can develop a little bit more revenue during the downtime?
It's a great question. Urban Float from a business model is very similar to like a Massage Envy, to like a Hand and Stone, or to an Orange Theory, kind of a membership based spa center, wellness center. If this happened 3 years from now, I would hope that we would have, instead of 250 members, like 550 members, right? So our membership base is absolutely crucial, right? If God forbid a pandemic were to happen again, or if it comes back in the fall, the smart thing to do is, and what I've been telling some of my other business owner friends, is to take a hard look at their expenses, take a hard look at how they're going to leverage their most effective marketing, and just go pedal to the metal once we reopen, and really take as much momentum as possible. If it's going to happen in the fall, God forbid, and funny that you bring it up, Brian, my mind I can't even wrap my head around closing again a second time. I don't even know if I can even stomach that again, but that is so soon, right? It's April and you're thinking about September, October.
Really hope that we don't have to go through that again, but
no,
that's why I'm asking these questions. That's a
great question. I actually haven't wrapped my head around thinking about it, because I'm still dealing with the one we're dealing with right now. The federal government is stepping up and helping business owners with their losses through the disaster, the economic injury disaster loan, and also the Paycheck Protection Program. So those two loans are great, I guess, bridges to trying to restart your business. They don't make up for lost revenue, but they help with bringing your employees back. I don't think that is over. Having had a conversation with my bank today, I think this is going to be one of a few rounds, depending on how long this goes. If this goes into June, July, even crazy to think even August, a lot of businesses are going to be hurting, and some might not even make it out. And to no fault of our own, really. So it's hard to say how we're going to mitigate it. All I can say is, we depend greatly on our membership base to have a great experience with us, tell everybody that they can. And I would say I would be more prepared if it happened 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. Bring back the Spanish flu. I'll be ready for you guys, but but doing this like 3-4 months later, I don't know. That's crazy to think, but I can see it happening. You're right.
Hypothetically speaking, if the people who come to you regularly, if that was to skyrocket after this, do you think extending your hours to accommodate more floats is something that you could adapt just to increase your revenue before the fall comes?
Mm-hmm. Sure, certainly. So we did that last summer. Our first float was at 7:30 in the morning, and our last float was at 9:00 in the evening.
Okay.
Our winter hours were 7:30 to 7:30 Monday through Saturday, and then Saturday and Sunday we just started a couple hours later in the day, but Sunday we closed at 6. So we definitely, there's float centers in the country that are so packed that they're open 24 hours a day, and it's a key card entry only. So it's like blacked out windows, and you got to show your ID, and you go to your room, and you're out of there. You don't even see anybody. So
that would
I'd love to get to that.
Lower your expenses.
Yeah. It would be amazing. I think, Brian, your opinion here would be interesting too. I think even previous to COVID-19, there's always been a mental health issue in this country. Coming out of COVID-19, I think there's going to be even a bigger one, considering the isolation, job loss, some of the impact of people to their families. So I think we're in a helpful position to bring some of those people in and help them learn about relaxation and anxiety management, stress management. Which is the core of our business. So I'm hopeful that, we can weather this current storm and help people recover from this mentally as well.
I think maybe talking to some local psychiatrists would, and maybe create like a Delaware or Southern Delaware mental movement would be an interesting play in this summer after we get out of all this, and help get your name out there a little bit more. I mean, I think everybody knows where Urban Float is, right on northbound Ocean Highway in Rehoboth. But I think something like that would be interesting for sure.
Definitely.
I think a lot of people would benefit from it.
Definitely.
Especially with the times we're in right now. And even before that, I think it's a big opportunity that people are going to take advantage of once they learn about it a bit more.
I hope so, Brian. I hope so. And we've partnered with different organizations in the area, like the VA in Georgetown, and floating veterans. I think in December was, or was it, I can't remember if it was October or November, was Veterans Appreciation Month. And we were floating a bunch of veterans. We did a similar program for them that we're doing for the healthcare industry, and members and the community were purchasing floats for their program. So we were able to float veterans coming in. They're suffering from PTSD. And that's a huge thing that the Army has float centers throughout their different bases. I believe the SEAL team actually has a float center in Fort Bragg or wherever I think it might be Fort Bragg. So the special operations uses floats, flotation therapy. So there's definitely different avenues. It's a matter of, trying to pick the right ones to invest our time in and try to bring it in.
The 80-20 rule.
That's right. Right.
We are running a little bit short on time with my free Zoom plan. So the last question I have for you is, being a part of a franchise, the paycheck
protection program.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And
sure.
Do they look at you as a solo entity, or do they look at the whole franchise to see if you are able to apply for that loan?
Yeah. So from an Urban Float perspective, I do business as Urban Float, but my actual corporation is called Mid-Atlantic Wellness Group.
Gotcha.
So I do have to hit the checkbox on our application that we are in the franchise directory. But my qualification for the loan is based purely on our location.
Okay.
So each Urban Float around the country, we have float centers in Houston, Ohio, Washington, Oregon. They're all applying because we're all independent entities that we do business as the franchise. So that's a great question. I really encourage people who are listening, and if you are in a small business that's less than 500 employees, Paycheck Protection Program is a great program. That's a forgivable loan if you bring all your employees back. And you can also use a portion of that loan towards your operating expenses, leases, utilities, operation expenses. And then the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is a bigger loan that's not forgivable. However, they both have incredibly low interest rates. I think it's 0.5% or 1%, all backed by the SBA, no personal guarantees. I've done a ton of research, Brian, on this because I had to dive right into it right away. So highly look at that, SBA.gov, or go to your local, your branches, and talk to your bankers there. And they'll if they're registered to help you with the SBA, they can help process your application as well.
And if anybody has any questions out there, please feel free to comment down below and we'll do our best to help you out. But I think that about does it for us, Carlos.
Thanks for having me on, Brian.
I really appreciate it. I look forward to being on your podcast.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on, man. It'd be great.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one.
You too, pal.
Bye.